The valley looked like something out of a painting that evening, a mixture of gold and violet light as the sun dipped behind the distant ridges, spilling long shadows across the chapel grounds. Lanterns strung between fence posts and old cedar beams swayed gently in the breeze and cast trembling amber halos on the dusty ground. Horses snorted from the hitching posts, their silhouettes shuddering like restless spirits. Everyone in town had shown up. They always did when something unusual happened. Mara had lived her entire life being unusual. Inside the small bridal cabin behind the chapel, the murmurs and shuffling boots outside felt like thunder to her ears. She stood in the middle of the room, enormous hands twisting nervously as she stared at herself in the full-length mirror. But she didn't see herself, not really. All she saw was the heavy bridal cloth covering her from head to toe. Layers of soft, snowy fabric cascaded over her shoulders, down her powerful arms, across her hips, pooling so massively at her feet that the seamstress had needed 2 whole bolts of fabric just to complete it. The cloth wasn't just a garment, it was a fortress, a shield, a hiding place she didn't want to step out of. Her breath shook inside the suffocating cocoon. They're all out there. They'll see you. They'll judge you. They always do. Her father's voice, gravelly, disappointed, sharp as smashed glassicode in her mind. Too big for a daughter. Too big for a woman. Too much for any man. She squeezed her eyes shut. He'd been gone for years, but his words clung to her like burrs buried under the skin. No matter how far she walked, how hard she worked, or how much she tried to shrink herself, she could never escape them. The knock at the door startled her. 3 soft taps. Familiar, gentle, and behind them came the calm, steady voice that had changed everything. Mara, you all right? Luke. Just the sound of his voice softened the panic clawing at her ribs. His voice always did that, quiet, warm, steady, like a fire on a cold night. He never raised it, never barked orders like other men. When he spoke, he sounded like someone who thought before he opened his mouth. Someone who didn't waste words on cruelty. Still, she couldn't manage to answer. Luke waited a long breath before turning the doorknob and stepping into the room. His hat was in his hands, thumb rubbing the brim the way he did when he was nervous. His shirt was freshly pressed, though she could see the faint crease where he'd ironed it himself, crooked, stubborn, endearing. His storm gray eyes lifted, taking her in, and a slow smile spread across his face. You look beautiful. The words hit her like a blow, not because she didn't want to hear them, but because she couldn't believe he meant them. The cloth hid everything about her, the size of her shoulders, the breadth of her back, the long scar on her cheek from when she fell onto an iron hook while hauling hay. It hid the parts of her she hated most. You can't even see me, she whispered, voice muffled through the layers. I don't have to, he said simply. Her breath shuddered. Luke took a step closer, but he didn't reach for her. He knew better. He'd learned that she flinched when people moved too quickly. Instead, he approached the way he always did, slow, steady, letting her decide whether to lean in or step back. He held out his hand, not touching, just offering. But Mara's feet wouldn't move. Something icy clamped around her bones. Luke, she whispered, heart pounding so loud she thought he might hear it. I don't think I can do this. His brow creased. Mada. No. Her voice cracked. You don't understand. He lowered his hand. I can try, he murmured, if you tell me. Behind the cloth, tears welled and slid down her cheeks. You haven't seen me today, she whispered. Not since the dress fitting, not like this is, and once you remove it, she choked on her breath. You'll see the truth. The truth. He echoed softly. That I'm too big, she said. Too strong, too strange, that I look wrong standing next to you. That everyone will think you made a mistake, that you'll think it too. Silence. Luke's boots creaked as he stepped closer. She felt the warmth of him, the gentleness of his presence pressing through the cloth. His hands lifted slow and careful and lightly touched her covered arms. Mara, he said quietly, I've known you for 2 years now. I've worked beside you in the fields. I've seen you lift a wagon wheel by yourself. I've seen you gentle, a wild horse that nearly broke my ribs. I've seen you laugh, cry, carry burdens no one should carry. And never, not once, did I see anything wrong with you. She swallowed hard. He took a breath. You think this cloth hides you, he said, but it doesn't hide the woman I fell in love with. I already know you, every scar, every strength. Her throat tightened. But they'll stare, she whispered. They always stare. Let them, he said. They've been staring your whole life. But this time, they'll see you walking toward me, and me walking beside you. A sob escaped her, small, helpless, raw. You really want to do this, she whispered. Luke rested his forehead against the fabric covering her chest, like a silent promise. I want to spend my life with you, he said softly. Not the idea of you. Her legs shook. Her lungs squeezed. Her fingers dug into the cloth. Outside, the chapel bell chimed once, twice, calling them. Mara drew in a trembling breath. Luke, yes, please, she whispered. fragile as spun glass. Don't take it off. Not yet. Asterisk, he nodded against her. I won't, not until you're ready. Slowly, carefully, he offered his arm again. This time, she placed her enormous hand in his asterisk, and with her heart hammering like a frightened bird in her chest, Mara stepped out of the cabin still, hidden, still terrified but walking toward a future she never believed she could have. The chapel's wooden doors groaned softly as Luke guided Mara inside. Every conversation died instantly. The hush that followed felt like the air before a lightning strike. The guests rose slowly, turning as one, their faces angled toward the enormous, cloth-wrapped figure who stepped into the lantern-lit hall. Mara felt all of them. Every stare, asterisk, every held breath, asterisk, every whisper swallowed. Before it ever left a throat, asterisk, her heart hammered so violently she thought the cloth might flutter with each thudding beat. Her feet, enormous and trembling inside her soft white shoes, struggled to carry her weight forward. Luke's arm beneath her hand felt like her only anchor to the world. He didn't rush her. He never did. Asterisk, he matched her step slow, steady, unbothered by the sea of curious faces. Asterisk, Mara wished she could see nothing at all. The cloth, while thick, wasn't blindfolding. She could make out shapes, vague shadows, the aisle stretching before her. She saw heads bowed, hands clasped. A child lifted high enough to peek at the unusual bride. Her stomach twisted. They're staring. Of course they're staring. They always do. Asterisk, but Luke didn't seem to notice the whispers. His posture didn't change. His grip didn't tighten or falter. There was a pride in the way he walked with her as if escorting the tallest, strongest woman in the region was an honor, not a spectacle. He leaned toward her gently. You're doing just fine, he whispered. His voice steadied her shaky breaths. They reached the altar, where the preacher and elderly man with hair like snow moss and hands curled with age stood blinking up at Mara. He tilted his head slightly, taking in her towering silhouette, but to his credit, he didn't gape or mutter or shrink back. He simply nodded with quiet respect. Asterisk, welcome, child, he said softly. Asterisk, the word child would have offended her coming from anyone else, but in his voice, it wasn't belittling. It was comforting, an old man's blessing, not a label. Mara's throat tightened around a sob she didn't dare release. Luke stepped in front of her now, turning to face her fully. She felt his presence, warm and calm, directly before her. She couldn't see his face clearly through the cloth, but she sensed the smile in his voice. Asterisk, you ready for this? Her breath wavered. I don't know. Asterisk, he lifted his hands slowly until his fingertips rested against the edge of the cloth. She felt them through the layers, warm, steady, careful. Her pulse leaped. Asterisk, Mara, he murmured. It's just me. Yes, just him. Asterisk, just Luke Halden, the rancher who never once laughed at her size, who never called her a burden, who never acted ashamed, standing beside her. Asterisk, but still letting him see her here, in front of everyone, felt like stepping unclothed into a storm. Her fingers curled anxiously. There's nothing to be afraid of, he whispered, and though she didn't believe it, not fully, she nodded, barely trembling. Luke inhaled gently, then lifted the cloth. The world burst into color. Warm gold from the lanterns washed over her face. Cool air touched her damp skin. The heavy weight on her shoulders loosened as he peeled the fabric back, revealing first her face, then her shoulders, then the full, towering figure of the woman she always tried to hide. Asterisk, the audience gasped, not a sharp, mocking gasp, but a collective, stunned one. Asterisk, for the first time, Mara didn't shrink. Asterisk, she stood motionless, chest tight, bracing for Luke's expression. She expected a flinch, a blink, a flicker of doubt, just one sign that maybe. Finally, now that she stood, unveiled and unmistakably huge, he realized what he had chosen. Asterisk, but Luke. Luke looked up at her like she was the sunrise. His eyes softened. Asterisk, his lips parted slightly, not in shock, but admiration. A slow, warm smile spread across his face. There she is, he whispered. The woman I love. Asterisk, Mara's breath hitched violently, tears burning her eyes. She wasn't prepared for tenderness, not like this. Not in a moment she had been sure would bring rejection. Asterisk, somewhere in the crowd, a woman sighed softly. Someone else murmured, my goodness. But the tone held wonder, not ridicule. Asterisk, Luke stepped closer. He reached up because he had to. She was tall enough for him to need to tilt his head, and brushed his thumb gently along the scar on her cheek. Asterisk, the tender touch nearly buckled her knees. Asterisk, you're not afraid, she whispered, barely audible. Asterisk, of what? He asked genuinely. Asterisk, of me. Asterisk, she swallowed painfully. Of my size, of what people think. Luke shook his head slowly. Mara, you could be 7 feet tall or 2 feet tall, and I'd still choose you. Not because of what people see, because of who you are. But they're staring, she said, voice shaky. Let them stare, he replied. Maybe for once they'll see something worth staring at. Her breath trembled, her knees felt weak. Asterisk, her heart felt too big for her chest. Asterisk, he gently lifted her hand, her enormous, calloused, powerful hand, and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. Her breath caught audibly. The guests gasped again. but this time with quiet awe. Luke didn't look away from her. "You spent your whole life hiding," he murmured, "but I want the whole world to see you. I want them to know the woman strong enough to move mountains and gentle enough to cry over a broken foal. I want them to see the woman I'll call my wife." The preacher cleared his throat, smiling faintly. "Shall we proceed?" Mara wiped her eyes with shaking fingers. "Luke," she whispered. "Yes." His voice was warm, steady. I'm not hiding anymore." His smile deepened. "Good," he said. "I was never marrying the cloth." The chapel erupted in soft applause, tentative at first, then growing stronger, fuller, bolder. Not mocking, not cruel, but warm, approving. Mara, overwhelmed, leaned forward until her forehead rested gently atop Luke's. He closed his eyes, letting her weight, her height, her presence settle over him like a vow. "You're mine," he whispered. She exhaled shakily, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I always was," she breathed. "I just didn't think anyone would want me." Luke brushed a thumb across her cheek. "I do," he said, "and I always will." And in that moment under the golden lanterns, surrounded by the quiet, humbled crowd, with the cloth pulled like a shedskin around her feet, Mara finally believed him.